welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now, I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book Evolution, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. Call me Ignacio. His name was Benedito. I won't give our full names out of a sense of decorum, something any thoughtful person will understand. Just Ignacio is enough. And just Benedito will do. It may not be much, but it's something. And it lines up with Juliet's philosophy. What's in a name? She asked her lover. A rose by any other name would still smell as sweet. So let's talk about Benedito's scent. And right away, let's make one thing clear: he was the least Romeo-like man you could imagine. He was 45 years old when we met. I won't say exactly when, because everything in the story must feel mysterious and cut short. He was 45 and had plenty of black hair. For the strands that weren't black, he used a chemical treatment so good you couldn't tell the difference in it unless you saw him first thing in the morning. But he never showed himself to anyone that early. Everything else about him was real: his legs, arms, head, eyes, clothes, shoes, his watch chain and walking cane. Even the diamond pin he wore in his tione, of the finest I have ever seen, was genuine and properly bought. It cost him a good sum, and I myself saw him purchase it at a jeweler's shop on Rua do Ouvidor. Morally, he was genuine too. People don't really change who they are, and Benedito was a good man, or at least a peaceful one. Intellectually, though, he wasn't very original. You could say he was like a well-run inn where ideas from all over the world came to stay. These ideas sat down at the table with the family and got along just fine. Sometimes, two opposing or simply unpleasant ideas would meet there, but no fights ever broke out. The innkeeper made sure his guests treated each other with kindness. That's how he managed to mix a vague sort of atheism with two religious brotherhoods he had helped start, though I can't remember if it was in Gavia, Tijuca, or in Genho Velho. He wore devotion, disbelief, and silk socks all the same. I never actually saw the socks, mind you, but he kept no secrets from his friends. We met while traveling to Vesuras. We had gotten off the train and climbed into the stagecoach that would take us from the station to the town. We exchanged a few words at first, and soon enough we were talking openly, carried along by the circumstances that forced us to share this ride, even before we knew each other's names. Naturally, the first topic we discussed was the progress brought by the railroads. Benedito remembered the days when the entire journey had to be made on the back of donkeys. We told a few stories, mentioned a few names, and quickly agreed that railroads were essential to the country's development. Anyone who has never traveled like this wouldn't understand how valuable such simple and solid conversations are to chase away the boredom of the road. The mind gets some fresh air. The body feels relaxed, the blood doesn't race, and you feel at peace with God and mankind. It won't be our children who see this entire country crossed by railroads, he said. Certainly not, I replied. Do you have children, sir? None at all. Neither do I, and not even in 50 years will that happen. Yet, it's our most urgent need. I compare Brazil to a child who is still crawling. It will only start walking when it has many railroads. Beautiful idea. Benedicto exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. I don't care if it's beautiful, as long as it's fair. It's both beautiful and fair, he replied kindly. Yes, sir, you're absolutely right. Brazil is still crawling. It will only start walking when it has many railroads. We arrived in Vassouras. I went to stay at the house of the local judge, an old friend of mine. He stayed in town for a day, and then continued inland. 8 days later, I returned to Rio de Janeiro, but alone. A week after that, he came back too. We met again at the theater, talked for a long time, and exchanged news. In the end, Benedicto invited me to join him for lunch the next day. I accepted. He treated me like a prince, served excellent cigars, and kept the conversation lively and engaging. Benedicto leaned back in his chair, the sunlight pouring through the window behind him. I noticed then how his voice seemed to carry more weight during meals. It cleared the mind and left us both calm and content. But maybe it was also the lunch. It was truly something special. I wouldn't dare compare the feast of a Roman emperor to that table, but it came close. As we sat with our coffee and brandy, he rested his elbow on the edge of the table, watching the tip of his cigar glow red. He said, "On this last trip, I saw how right you were about Brazil still learning to walk." I replied with a quiet, "Ah." "Yes, sir," he went on. "It's exactly what you said back on the coach ride from Vassouras. We won't really move forward until we have more railroads. You wouldn't believe how true that is." He talked about many things after that, the habits of people in the countryside, the difficulties of daily life, the slow progress. But he also said that, despite all that, the people had good hearts and wanted better for themselves. The problem was the government. It wasn't helping the country catch up. It almost seemed like it wanted to keep Brazil behind the rest of the Americas. Still, he insisted, we had to believe that ideas matter more than people. Governments exist for the people, not the other way around. One deep calls to another, he added, quoting an old phrase. Then he stood up and offered to show me the other rooms. Each one was decorated with care. He showed me his collections, paintings, coins, old books, stamps, and weapons. There were swords and foils, though he admitted he didn't know how to use them. Among the paintings, I saw a beautiful portrait of a young woman. I asked who she was. Benedicto smiled. "I won't press you," I said, smiling too. No need to hide," he replied. "She was someone I loved very much. Beautiful, isn't she? You can't imagine how lovely she was. Her lips were like red paint, her cheeks like roses. Her eyes were black as night, and her teeth perfect, like pearls. She was a true gift from nature." We moved then to his study. It was large, elegant, maybe a bit ordinary, but still complete in every way. He had 2 bookshelves filled with beautifully bound books, a world map, and 2 maps of Brazil. The desk was made of ebony, finely crafted. On it, casually open, lay an almanac from Le Millimetrort. The inkwell was made of crystal rock crystal, he told me, explaining the inkwell as he explained everything else in the room. In the next room stood an organ. He played the organ and loved music deeply. He spoke about it with passion, mentioning operas in favorite passages. He also told me that as a boy, he had started learning the flute but gave it up quickly which he now considered a shame, because the flute is, in truth, a very soulful instrument. He showed me other rooms, and we went to the garden, which was splendid. Art had helped nature, and nature had crowned art. When it came to roses, for there was no doubt, he said, that the rose is queen of all flowers. She had every kind, and from every region. I left completely charmed. We met a few times after theatres in the street, at the theater, at friends' house, and I had the chance to get to know him better. 4 months later, I traveled to Europe for business, a trip that would keep me away for a full year. He stayed behind, busy preparing for an election. He wanted to become a congressman. I was the one who encouraged him to run, though I had no political intentions. I did it only to please him. Comparing it loosely, it was like complimenting the cut of his vest. He took the idea seriously and officially entered the race. One day, while crossing a street in Paris, I suddenly ran into Benedict. "What's going on?" I asked in surprise. "I lost the election," he said, "and came to Europe for a trip." He didn't leave my side after that. We traveled together for the rest of my time abroad. He confessed to me that losing the election had not discouraged him from entering Parliament. Quite the opposite, it had only made him more determined. He spoke to me about a big plan. "I want to see you become a minister," I told him. Benedict hadn't expected those words. His face lit up, but he quickly masked his excitement. "That's not what I meant," he replied. "But when you do become minister, believe me, you'll be Minister of Industry, and nothing else. We've had enough of political parties. What we need now is to develop the country's real potential, its untapped strength. Remember what we talked about on the way back from Vesuras? Brazil is still crawling. It'll only move forward with railroads." "You're right," I agreed, a bit surprised. "And why else do you think I came to Europe myself?" "I came here about a railroad project. I've already sorted things out in London, really." "Absolutely." I showed him the documents, and he looked at them in awe. Since I had gathered some notes, statistical data, pamphlets, reports, and copies of contracts related to industrial matters, I shared them with him. Benedito told me he would start collecting similar materials too. And indeed, I saw him going through ministries, banks, and associations, asking for notes and booklets, which he packed into his suitcases. But the passion he showed, though intense, didn't last long. It was borrowed. What truly excited Benedito were political catchphrases and parliamentary formulas. He carried a whole arsenal of them in his head. In our conversations, he often repeated them, almost as if testing them out. He believed they had great prestige and immeasurable value. Many of these expressions came from English tradition, and he preferred them over others, as if they carried a bit of the British House of Commons within them. He enjoyed them so much that I'm not sure he would ever accept real freedom without that verbal toolkit. I think he wouldn't. I even believe that, if he had to choose, he would pick those short, convenient phrases, some beautiful, others powerful, all of them absolute truths that don't require thinking, fill the gaps, and leave people at peace with God and their neighbors. We returned together, but I stayed in Pernambuco, and later went back to London, from where I came to Rio de Janeiro 1 year later. By then, Benedito was already a congressman. I visited him. I found him preparing his first speech in Congress. He took out some notes and excerpts from reports, pages from political economy books. some with strips of paper marking sections labeled currency exchange, land rates, the grain question in England, Stuart Mill's view, Thiers' mistake on railroads, and so on. He was sincere, detailed, and passionate. He talked about these matters as if he had just discovered them himself, explaining everything from the very beginning, as if I knew nothing. He was determined to show practical men in Congress that he, too, understood practical matters. Then he asked me about the railway company. I told him what had happened so far. In 2 years, I said, I plan to open the first stretch of track. And the English investors? What about them? Are they satisfied? Hopeful? They are very hopeful. You wouldn't believe it. I shared some technical details with him, but he seemed distracted as he listened, either because my explanation was too complicated or for some other reason. When I finished, he said he was glad to see me involved in industrial progress. That was exactly what the country needed. And with that, he kindly offered to read the opening of a speech he would deliver in a few days. It's still a rough draft, he told me, but the main ideas are there. Then he began. In the midst of rising public unrest and partisan noise that drowns out the voices of true national interests, allow me to bring a plea from the people themselves. Gentlemen, it is time we focus solely, note that I say solely, on the material development of our country. I do not deny what you might say in response. You will tell me that a nation is not made only of a stomach to digest food, but also of a head to think and a heart to feel. I reply that all of that will count for little or nothing if the nation does not have legs to walk. And here, let me repeat what I once said to a friend while traveling inland years ago. Brazil is a child crawling on the floor. It will only begin to walk when it is crossed by railways. I couldn't hear the rest. I was left deep in thought. I stood there stunned, more than just thoughtful, me mind spinning as I looked into the deep chasm that psychology had opened right beneath my feet. This man is telling the truth, I thought to myself. He truly believes what he wrote. And so I followed that thought down a winding path, trying to understand how that memory of the carriage ride from Vasouras had taken shape inside him. Eventually, I found something. Forgive me if this sounds a bit dramatic. I realized it was yet another example of evolution at work. Exactly as Spencer described it, Spencer or Benedict, one of the two.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discovered the infinite layers of the human experience.